your favorite buddy morning show.
Okay, well, get out of here. Go. Anyone can do your job.
Ken Laird.
Anyone. You, what's your name?
Guy Junker.
You.
TribLIVE Radio.
Let's jump out.
I consider our listeners family.
Okay, good. There you go. And our guests, and we bring a brand new guest. First time we've ever talked to Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com, at Rivals Keenan on Twitter. So he is Chris Peak's colleague, I guess you could say, right? Part of the Rivals Network. Keenan, will you admit to that? Do you know Chris Peak, the pit writer, or are you guys backyard brawl rivals as well?
No, I know Chris. Very, very good professional relationship there. Great guy.
Can't do Mountaineer's Lair. You'd have to think of something else.
I know.
Panthers, yeah.
Great's a stretch, too, by the way. Chris's show coming up at 2 today here on TribLIVE Radio. What's going on with the ears? And were you down at Big 12 media festivities or just watching from afar like the rest of us?
Yes, I was watching from afar, but one of my colleagues actually went down and gave me kind of everything I needed to know that I wasn't able to see from afar.
Were West Virginia fans hoping they would change the playoff format, the round robin, decision-making of their championship decision-making?
I think it's a mixed bag there. I think that you have some West Virginia fans that kind of wish they would look towards expansion a little bit, maybe some Eastern partners, and then you have some others that, like that. They like the fact they get to play every team. They like the fact that they're guaranteed a game with Oklahoma and Texas every year. It's kind of interesting, and I think that, on top of that, with the whole championship issue, I think as well, another mixed bag. You have some people that, if West Virginia was in that position, do they want to play another extra game, or do they want to take a chance and potentially be left out like you saw what happened last year?
We're talking to Keenan Cummings here of WVSports.com.
Keenan, this I don't know if this would be Dana Holgerson's most talented team, but there's certainly some experience on here anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely the deepest, most experienced team he's had here. I don't know, like you said, at the top, maybe not most talented, certainly not offensively. They have to replace some key players. Clint Trickett's gone. Skylar Howard got some time last year. But they do return a lot of talent, particularly defensively, 9 starters. A lot of other guys that saw a lot of time last year. So they're getting to that point where, you'll talk to the coaches, you'll talk to the players. There's not a lot of excuses left. This unit has to perform this year. They're depending on being one of the, if not the best, defense in the Big 12.
Well, and that's a change, right? I mean, was this Holgerson's best defensive unit he's had?
He said the other day that this could be, and he believes that this will be the best defensive unit, not only at West Virginia, that he's ever been around as a coach, which is pretty lofty praise.
Now, put this defense with Tavon Austin and Stedman Bailey and Geno Smith, and you might have a national champion.
Yeah, I think it's actually been kind of weird for West Virginia since they joined. At the starting, the defenses were a disaster. Last year, the defense took a step forward. The offense played well early. Then they had some inconsistencies, some struggles. Now this year, you come in, the defense looking really strong. I think West Virginia's kind of that sneaky pick. I don't think anybody's picking West Virginia to win the Big 12, but they're that sneaky kind of sleeper pick. If the offense is able to put it together and the defense lives up to expectations, which you guys know as well as I do, expectations and following through are completely different things. But if they're able to do that, this could be a sneaky team in the Big 12.
We watched Bethel Park's Nick Kwiatkowski here make a run to a state championship a few years ago. I see he's first team all Big 12 preseason anyway. Would you call him the leader of the day, or are there a bunch of guys there?
A lot of senior guys. He's definitely one of the leaders, unquestionably. Carl Joseph is up there. You could argue him as well as K.J. Dillon. Kyle Rose on the defensive line. So there's a lot of guys that have played together, a lot of snaps. These are these same guys that were in 2012. Teams were scoring 50 points on them, rolling up 600 yards of offense. So they've kind of grown up over time together, really improved last year, took a lot of steps forward. But like I said, what they're returning this year, combined with what they've got coming back in other areas as well as some of the newcomers, they're really expecting big things. And Nick's going to be a key part of that.
Now, it's year 5 for Holgerson. What's the state of affairs with his acceptance among Mountaineer Nation?
I think they've embraced him. At first, I think it was a little, there was a different feel there. I don't necessarily think it was good or bad, but he was a little bit different than what West Virginia fans were used to. I think over time they've embraced him. But as I mentioned earlier, I think this is a big year for Dana. He knows it. He said it a bunch. I don't think, he has to win X amount of games, but I think they've got to go out and impress some people this year. There were a couple plays, a couple games they could have easily won, in the final couple possessions. You look at the TCU game, for example, they blew a lead there. There was a couple other games that they lost. And if they're able to hold on in some of those games, you look at this season completely differently. This team finished 7-6, could have easily been better. You could make that argument for every college football team across America. But this is a year that Dana's going to kind of have to put it all together. I think that he's got to show people that this thing's moving in the right direction. I think it's easy to see when you look at the depth charts, you look at the depth overall, the talent level with recruiting recently, that things are improving, but it all boils down to results.
Tom Bradley was a good friend of the show, Keenan. Do you think he had a good impact on the program while he was there, now that he's out at UCLA?
I don't think there's any way you can argue he didn't. I mean, any time you have someone with his type of experience, what he's been through, he was able to kind of impart that on people in the program. I don't think there's any absolute no doubt that you can take anything negative away from that experience.
Now, how about Russell Shell, who's a Western PA guy? Will he get starter reps, no question, this year? Is he going to be the focal point of the offense, or what will his role be this year?
It's going to be kind of a two-prong attack there with him and Wendell Smallwood. You saw that last year. Russell was going on to a big year last year. He finished right around 1,000, but he would have had a big year. Got hurt in the Baylor game. It cost him 3 or 4 games, and even when he came back, he was a little gimpy. At the end of the year, you really started to see him make that transformation. He's completely changed his body since he's been at West Virginia. Looks great. He's in the best shape of his life. I talked to the strength coach not too long ago, and he kind of echoes those sentiments. And he looks like a completely different player. He's focused. As long as he stays healthy, I think he's in for a big season.
How about a breakout player to look out for on offense?
I think it's Shelton Gibson, the wide receiver. West Virginia's got to replace a lot of what they had on the outside. You don't lose a guy like Mario Alford or a guy like Kevin White and hope you can replace it. I mean, you've got to try to replace it. I think that he's going to be the number one guy they kind of pinpoint, at least early in the season. Has a great relationship with Skylar Howard. Saw some time last year. Didn't have a huge factor, obviously, playing behind those two guys. But he's going to be counted on to take the top off defense and stretch the field.
I guess last one from me, we had some reports that the two big bosses were talking, Pitt and West Virginia, about maybe getting the backyard brawl back again somewhere down the road. Has there been any interest in that from the West Virginia side, from the fans?
Oh, tons. I think that you ask any West Virginia fan, you'll have a few that says, we don't need Pitt, or vice versa. You hear it from both sides. But I think everybody that's ever been around either program knows that that's kind of a staple. It's a great game. Fans love it. It always brings a lot of interest. I think from West Virginia's side, you've heard from administrative, coaches, fans. They've been pushing it. Now you're hearing some of that back from Pitt. So, I think it's something that fans would love to see worked out in the future.
TCU by far the best team in the Big 12, or is that debatable?
I think it's TCU or Baylor. I think that game will be pretty big. I think Oklahoma State's another one of those sleeper picks that people like a lot, but I don't see them competing. Oklahoma's always in the mix, but TCU returns so much, and Baylor's to the point now where they're a well-oiled machine. It's Art Briles was talking the other day on Media Day. They've won the league 2 years in a row, at least a share of it, and they were picked second. He said, "Do we have to win it 3 times?"
What's the best upside for West Virginia to think? A realistic one?
I think this team can win 9 and 10 games if things fall into place. Now, like I said, they have to have things fall into place, but they can win 9 and 10 games. They can compete. Like I said last year, they had a chance to really make a dent, weren't able to do it. They kind of feel like they have some unfinished business, but it's going to rely on the offense. Skylar Howard's going to be carrying a lot of weight, filling in for Clint Trickett. He did it at the end of the year. Looked good, but you got to take that next step.
Good stuff, Keenan. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the insight. If you have an insult for Chris Peak, we'll pass it on later in the show. We can get a little rivalry going here.
Yeah, we probably should do that. We're too cordial, him and I. I think that we've got too good of a relationship there.
All right, man. Thanks for doing it. We'll talk soon.
No problem. See you guys later.
All right, Keenan Cummings from WVSports.com.
What's this world coming to? A Dana Holgerson team led by defense.
Yeah, right.
Cats will be sleeping with dogs the next thing we know.
He claims it'll be led by defense. And his best defensive team ever might be damning with faint praise.
Well, that was one of the reasons I asked the Tom Bradley question. Is this residual from Tom Bradley? I mean, their defense, numbers-wise, wasn't great last year, but improved a ton over the year before, or his first year there.
Yeah. Well, if Baylor and TCU were the best two teams, they play them both on the road this year in late October.
Yeah.
So that will not be easy. They also play Oklahoma on the road. So I don't know if I'm buying 9-10 wins with that schedule. We'll see it plays out. I guess they do get an extra week to prepare for TCU. That's a Thursday night game on October 29th. And, of course, no Pitt in West Virginia this year. But we're equal opportunity. We had Bob Shoop on talking Penn State earlier in the week. We had Jerry DePaul on yesterday talking Pitt football guys. So, maybe it's a question of whether it was West Virginia still to be covered by Pittsburgh media outlets. But
why don't we get the Liberty Baptist coach on?
Yeah. Well, we can get Washington Jefferson coach on or something. They still have a football team?
Sure.